And so I return a few months after its airing to reminisce upon another brilliant, perfect season of Sangatsu no Lion. Yesteryear's outing was a bit more holistic of a look, an overview of some of the anime's broad themes that wandered over into presentation and characterization as well. But here, in order to avoid retreading old ground, I'll walk a much narrower and more direct path to a singular observational destination that I hope you'll agree is no less beautiful for it. What becomes increasingly striking as this second season goes on is how deeply empathetic a person Chika Umino, the series mangaka, must be. This is because there's a remarkable range of anxieties and experiences explored, each with such resonance and obvious care. Everything from a very genuine and believable childhood bullying scenario to the burdens borne by those in old age makes Sangatsu a really impressive exploration of people writ large, and all the various hardships their positions in life burden them with. As monumental as Rei's own hang-ups and challenges are, Sangatsu is meticulous in giving perspective to every character, and refusing to allow us to overlook the fact that they too have their own challenges driving their thoughts, feelings, and actions. That inherent value to people that was so strongly insisted upon in its first season, and whose insistence continues into the second, seems to come from the same place as all that. Umino's acute sensitivity to all these different experiences reflects the same worldview that Sangatsu as a whole does, the view that each person and perspective has value to them.
川本さんの勘違いじゃない？グループの子もふざけてるだけでしょ。そんな、何でも悪い方に取っちゃダメダメ。
Let us take in the sight of Hina's teacher, one of the most seemingly monstrous characters offered up to bear witness to. If anyone could have remained a caricature, it was probably her. She serves the plot entirely suitably as a passive authority figure in the face of Takagi's bullying, and thus an enabler of it. Her insistence upon calm conformity to curtail candid conflict certainly seems set to follow the trend of leaning on ingrained preconceptions about Japanese society and how it functions to explain itself. Here she stands in response to this blatantly dreadful targeted behavior, whose deeply traumatic effects on Hina we are forced to take in episode after existence-wrenching episode. Passive, distant, detached.
もうやめて！そんな大きな声出さないで！でもだからって何よ！証拠なんてないじゃない。どうやって証明しろって言うのよ！もういや、いい加減にして巻き込まないでちょうだい。毎年毎年。
How foolish of us, how cruel of us to assume that she was content with this state of affairs, or at least concerned enough with her own convenience to tolerate them for that purpose. What fools were we, the audience, to somehow naively assume that there was no deeper, more personal, more painful explanation for how she handled this. Having seen this cycle repeat itself ad infinitum, as each new class comes in decade after decade, this teacher knows far better than any of us exactly the strife and pain this leads to, and in the face of all that is also entirely aware of her utter inability to intervene in that cycle with any success. The only thing she ends up being capable of is sacrificing her very self, precipitously losing weight, descending into the darkest void of anxious stress, and eventually sacrificing all the fire within her to burn up in the flames of her students' confounding malice, and delay that cycle by at least 1 year through the sheer, awesome, terrifying light of that self-destructive blaze. Umino recognizes the crucial point that an individual within a system has so little agency over that system. Blaming the teacher here would make things so simple, so easy, so fully explained, and so distorted from the truth of things. We love these easy answers, hunger for a victim to tear into and satisfy the lust for retribution witnessing such tragic unjustness arouses, and in so doing unjustifiably maul people like her. She isn't allowed to be seen as just crazy either. Her affliction is given a name. She didn't have an ambiguous breakdown. She has an anxiety attack, as the series tells us. Umino presents an unrelenting reality to this whole situation and the effects it has, turns this teacher from a cardboard prop with real malice into a flesh and blood human with real maladies. The former would have made her point about the need to address bullying just fine, but with the latter, she makes a further point about the need to address mental health, and the large amounts of stigma surrounding it, utilizing our own stigma, our own instincts to simply write her off as crazy, to decisively make that point. I love how she pivots off of this strongly declared overturning of our expectations as she starts digging into Takagi as well. Unrelenting in the scope of societal failings the series takes to task, Sangatsu no Lion then gets into the disillusionment of Japanese youth due to the destabilization of the nation's job market and the role of the educational system in it. And crucially, all that high-minded sociological consideration is thoroughly grounded in the thoroughly personal and emotional narrative we've just witnessed unfold. All of this may not interest a given person that much in a vacuum, but when it plays a role in a story they've already gotten invested in, then that hook is there. Takagi displays such destructive apathy because of that whole system surrounding her. She's been told to work hard to get into a good school, to get into a good college, to get into a good job, but what is all that even in service of? And much more pressingly, why should she believe in the prudence of going through all that when she's witnessed that whole system fall into a continuous decline? These systems that have been relied upon as the reasons given to care in life can no longer be trusted to yield those results they once did, and so now a whole generation of people is left without a goal to work towards that they can believe in, and a generation of authority figures is left without a way to justify to the children in their care why they should give any effort. Yuji Genda, an economist currently working at the University of Tokyo, has done a lot of research in this area, digging into this economic insecurity. In the early 2000s, he put out a large amount of research into the state of the job market in the wake of the economic collapse in the 90s, and the ensuing so-called lost decade. In the 2001 paper, Transition from School to Work in Japan, co-authored with his fellow economist Masako Kurosawa, they found that initial labor market conditions, i.e. when workers first enter the labor market after permanently leaving school, have a significant lasting impact on the employment experiences of workers in their teens and 20s. An increase in the unemployment rate at the time of labor market entry reduces the probability of gaining full-time regular employment, and more importantly, increases the future probability of workers to leave employers by lowering the quality of job matches. And that analysis would end up coming to fruition. As he said to the Financial Times in 2015 for an article of theirs on the subject, there are many men who couldn't find work when they were young, gave up, and they're now in middle age. The article goes on to note that the number of men aged 35 to 44 that are out of the labor force has doubled in the last 2 decades. Men who would have been 20 from 1991 to 2000. Men who missed their chance to enter a healthy workforce. The lost souls of the lost decade. You may have heard that term before, and may also have heard that the decade referenced ended up being a bit optimistic, as many argue that that depressive trend continued right into the 2000s with no real economic upswing in sight. Genda's paper, Who Really Lost Jobs in Japan? Youth Employment in an Aging Japanese Society, serves as a great companion piece to that first one, offering an explanation for the inability of young people entering the workforce to find solid employment that it laid out. It explores what he saw as overblown fears about the labor conditions for workers who are already middle-aged and older, while significantly worse statistical losses in this regard were being shouldered by young people, all while policy was put in place in attempts to protect those older workers that actively undermined the prospect of that more at-risk youth.
ねえ先生、答え出た？全員が頑張ったり努力したりしなくちゃいけないっていう理由探してくれた？
見つからんかった。
はあ。
Takagi is someone who would have grown up right in the throes of this lost decade. Her parents, or the parents of her friends, may very well have fallen into that generation of people affected by this newly destabilized labor market. So when she asks Kokubu-sensei why she should put her faith in that system, that carries real weight. It carries enough weight to force him to introspect. He'd always just thought that that effort was something you put in for your own sake. But now he realizes that people need to be able to contextualize their place in something larger than that to do so. In the end, he tells Takagi that he thinks, "You have so much anxiety, you don't know what to do." Raised within this system that tells her certain markers of success are assured as long as she tries her best, she's terrified of making that effort without achieving those levels of success. And because of the state of things she's grown up in, she has good reason to believe she might not achieve them. The anxiety referred to here is not medical anxiety as her teacher experienced, but rather economic anxiety, a term that literally describes fears over potential economic prospects. This is where our friend Yuji Genda comes in once again. Last paper I'm citing, I promise. In an international comparison of hope and happiness in Japan, the UK, and the US from 2016, he found that while a vast majority of respondents in the US and UK had hopes of achieving something, barely half of Japanese respondents aged 20 to 59 had that hope. While there are of course a whole massive array of factors contributing to that, the state of things that it speaks to is undeniable, and Takagi is a powerful demonstration of it. But take heed, O followers of His Holiness Jordy P. All of this is not put forth by the series in order to destroy the concept of personal responsibility. While we are presented with someone who views Takagi as a hopeless case, clearly totally unrepentant and unwilling to see how she was in the wrong, and thus deserving of punishment to hold her accountable for that, who gets largely dismissed, it does not suggest we simply offload all accountability onto a nebulous system or society. Kokubu-sensei keeps Takagi after school because of how clear that lack of guilt is, and, to the best of his ability, seeks to get to the bottom of, address, and correct the underlying issues causing that behavior. It is the role of authority figures, teachers, parents, and mentors to help children develop as people, not the role of those children to somehow just be developed innately of their own accord. However, as such, when someone errs as gravely as Takagi did, they, on an individual level, must learn and come to truly understand why that action was so wrong. The personal responsibility that must be taken is not equalizing suffering on their part to atone for the harm they did, but the responsibility of addressing the issues within themselves that caused them to make those mistakes, and which, if unaddressed, will cause them to continue making those mistakes and doing more harm. Once again, nuanced looks past the easy reflexive response to things into the harder truth of what will actually help fix them, derived from Chika Umino's intense empathy for other people. And what's so remarkable is that she can go from a look into adolescent economic anxiety that is this deep and thorough, right into an utterly agonizing battle against encroaching age by the shogi master Yanagihara, along with such genuine and well-considered portrayals of the many existential concerns that accompany it.
後に残ったものは年老いた体と託されたこのおびただしい数のたすきだけ。
It's one of the most harrowing, sobering, empowering stories we've gotten in 2018 anime thus far, and feels so rich, so thoroughly fully realized as a character study, because this is Sangatsu no Lion, where everyone is a human being, where everyone has value. Even the older generation of workers, so easy to shake your fist at for ruining things for the rest of you economically, are given their own representative whose own concerns receive their own empathetic considerations. This old friend of Yanagihara's lost in life without his work to define him anymore. Let me explain things this way. When even your jocks are good people, you're probably a great show, because you've broken away from simple, easy storytelling tropes and taken the time to view one of the easiest sets of people to view through this stereotype lens empathetically, as actual people and not simply their ingrained pop culture caricature. And with Sangatsu no Lion, Chika Umino created a whole cast that, bar a few characters, are deeply empathetic, which is the obsidian solid foundation that she uses to make them so incredibly endearing and heartwarming as people, nearly all of them exhibiting this admirable amount of empathy. I think this excerpt from an interview with her and the mangaka of Chihaya Furu really demonstrates the kind of person she is. The type of person to throw out and rewrite a carefully planned event within one of her character's arcs after finding out about someone else who had that hurtful experience, just in case they ended up reading it and were forced to relive that. Clearly, the mangaka's own strong sense of empathy lives within the characters she writes, as it should live within the heart of anyone who has taken in the joy of experiencing her remarkable work with this series.
After much delay, this is finally here. I'm sorry this video doesn't feel particularly momentous or climactic to provide a bit of catharsis to the wait it took to get here. I fell into a really intense period of self-doubt about my work's quality and justification of its own existence recently here, and while I still want to improve, and I think this video did benefit from the extra time given to really polish it up and turn out well, I think it took too much time to do so to make that worthwhile. I guess all I can concretely say is that, as always, I'm very much trying to find that good balance, and I'm sorry that it's been taking so long to do so. Thank you so much to Psyker, Carkeys, Mathways97, Jonathan Conley, Skylar Morrow, Tyler Monk, Sakamoto Mio, Teenshow37, Josh Grant, Rika Fag, Lord Liquid Bacon III, Stella Luna, Joaquim Allfelt, Darian Day Sotel, David McCown, Kieran Rice, Hijort Dog, Matt Bekelder, Smokeweed Sephiroth 420, and all my other patrons for sticking with me and maintaining faith as things are in flux here. New video soon.